welcome to, we're going to call this our Teacher Talk Morning Edition car ride. This is episode number 2. The purpose of this one is to kind of be a resource. The purpose of this is to answer questions that I've come across, from my mentees, the people I've been mentoring, or questions that you might have as well. So with that said, if you're on here and you have any kind of questions at all regarding teaching, just put it in the comments. I'll be more happy to answer those. Just kind of be a place as a resource to many different teachers. So my name is Gabriel. I've been teaching about 20 years now, and so during that time period, seen a lot of different things, and of course, all that has led to me having different ideas and tricks of the trade. So once again, just go ahead and leave a comment and a question. I'll be more happy to answer it. So one of the questions that I've gotten from my mentees, it's kind of a theme, more or less, I guess, than a specific question, is regarding classroom management. That just seems to be the hot button these days. I mean, you got all these things as a teacher. I mean, we got classroom management, you got lesson planning, you got administration, you got all these things. But classroom management usually is the thing that is the hardest for teachers to get down. And in my opinion, it is the most crucial thing to get down. I never really seen a teacher get fired for, not doing a proper lesson plan or not covering a specific standard. But I have seen them get fired for not having good classroom management. And so that's something really should focus on. And then one of the big topics regarding classroom management is how to get my class to be quiet, how to get my class to listen to me, how do I get their attention, how do I get them on task. And so when I think about that, the quick answer is you need to have some really good routines and procedures. But let me give you a bigger frame how that all fits into it. And I actually got this. It's called like 10-80-10 rule, what I call the 10-80-10 rule. And I was listening to a podcast about business. And in this podcast about business, they're talking about how you build culture in a company. And as they were talking, the speaker said this. He says, when you try to build culture in a company, you're going to have to have good leadership. You're going to have to have good leadership. But he says what you're always going to find is this breakdown going on. You're going to have 10% of the people working hard. Those are the ones that are excelling. Those are the ones that are doing really good. You're going to have 10% that always are on task or on point, right? And then you're going to have about 10% that are disruptive, not on task, 10% that are ruining the environment and everything else. And you have 80% that are kind of in the middle. And they will go one way or the other depending upon how the rest of the group is. So when it comes to classroom management, the first thing you understand is you don't need to get all the students on your side. You don't get to need, and honestly, I've been doing this 20 years, and I have classes still where the students are disruptive. I have classes where the students who are not working at all. And so you're going to come across that. And when I really break down the numbers, it's about 10% of the class. I have about 10% of the kids, a class of 30. I will always have about 3 kids that maybe are not working, off task, disruptive, something of that sort. So you're always going to have that 10%. And there's other strategies you're going to use when you're dealing with those students. But your goal is, and you want to have 10% that always do right. You're going to have students in your class that no matter what you do, no matter whose class they are in, they're going to exceed. They're going to do the work. They're going to behave. They're going to do everything you would hope a great student would do. You're going to have about 10% of kids, in my case, about 3 kids, 4 or 5, that are always doing what needs to be done, and there's no problems. So our goal then is to move that 80% over to the side with the students that are doing productive and doing well. So that is the goal. So the question is, how do you move that 80% over? So when it comes to classroom management, if you're trying to get the students' attention and you're trying to mainly just get them on the same page with you, just know your goal is not to get all the students, but your goal is to influence those 80 so they come over to the side with the other ones that are on task. And so that all breaks down to routines and procedures. And first of all, just so you know, if you are interested, I actually have a course on classroom management. I'll put the link down below. It's a free course on classroom management. Just kind of get the ball going and hopefully help you out. So if you're interested, just look in the description below, and I'll make sure I put the link in there for you. But routines and procedures, that is, man, I can't say enough, that is where you need to focus on. What those routines and procedures are, there's some standard things that I think you need to have in your class, but ultimately you're going to take those things, you're going to make it your own. You're going to make it something that is worthwhile for you, something that you can work with. And so, to some guiding principles regarding routines and procedures, I heard this quote, and I love it. It says, "We do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems." And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's my quote right there. Give an example. I have a goal of losing weight. That's my goal. My goal is to lose weight. That's a worthwhile goal. Everybody should go, I want to be in shape and lose weight. That's my goal. But I am not going to reach that goal just because that's what my goal is and that's where I want to be. I'm not going to rise to that. What's going to happen is I'm going to fall to the level of my systems. And so in this case, the systems for losing weight would be eating healthier, would be working out, would be some sort of routine, waking up at a certain time, going for a jog. Those are all routines and systems. And so if my goal is to lose weight and be in shape, my focus should be on the systems. And what's going to happen, because eventually what's going to happen, you're going to fall to the level of your systems. And so I love David Goggins. David Goggins, he just tells it like it is, right? So David Goggins, once again, he has things in place. Every morning he runs, he has his shoes out, he's ready to go. And so he created this system so there's no excuses. And so when it comes to teaching in your classroom, we don't rise, or the students don't rise to the level of our goals or our expectations, what they want. They fall to the level of our systems. They fall to what we tolerate, all right? And regarding culture as well, kind of going along with this, when you try to create culture in your classroom, culture is not created by the behavior. Culture is not created by the awards we celebrate, or created by the actions we celebrate. Culture is created by the behavior that we tolerate. So kind of all those things. And so you want to create a baseline in your classroom. And so when it comes to teaching in your class, you want this classroom management. You got to create a baseline where you are okay with it, where anything above this is not acceptable in your classroom. And you got to stay with it, be consistent with that. And so back to our routines and procedures, that's all a part of it. You got to create those routines and procedures so that way you can reinforce those boundaries. You can reinforce your expectations. And that creates that little net so that way behavior does not fall below that. So classroom management is a huge topic. And once again, you try to put all these things into this huge topic. And there are tips and tricks and everything else you can do to implement that will help you better with the classroom. But once again, you have to have that big framework, the big understanding of how it all plays out. Give you an example regarding that 10-80-10 rule. In my class, when I'm trying to get my students' attention, what I'll do is I'll be in the front of the class and I'll say, all right, everybody up here. And then students, I expect my students, and we train this, and they know my expectations, and they know the boundaries and everything else. I'll say, all right, so everybody up front, please. And then I'll wait a second or two. If I get the students' attention, perfect, we hit the mark, we're right on, we're perfect. But if not, then what I do is I have the system called teacher versus student. And so in teacher versus student, what happens is I have 6 points that I start the students out with. Now, if they get to 50 points by the end of the week, then they don't have homework the following week. So I have a reward system for the students as a class that if they get to 50 points as a class by the end of the week, they don't have homework the following week. So it's a reward system for them. And so I start students out at 6 points. And so when I'm in front of the class, after I need everybody's attention, if I get everybody's attention, we're ready to move on, we go for it. But if there's a student that is talking, or a group of kids that are off task, what I might do, or what I probably would do, is I put a mark under my name for teacher. So now kids, so the students start off at 6, but now because I got a mark, now they're down to 5. And what happens, and I might do that again once or twice if need be, but that 10-80-10 rule applies here because I got 10% always do what they want to. The 80% are kind of in the middle, and then that 10% is kind of the bottom. By doing that simple, everybody up here, give me attention, teacher versus student mark thing, it gets the attention of that 80%. And then once they come over to be quiet and listen and be ready for the next part of the assignment, then that only leaves that 10% that's left, which is 3 kids. And usually by then they see what's going on, and most of them will come over as well, and I'll get their attention. So because of the 10-80-10 rule, because I put that in place, the routines and the procedures of how I get the kids' attention, I can usually get the kids' attention within a matter of seconds because we've gone over so many times. They know my expectations, they know the limits, they know the routines, they know the procedures, and all that goes into play. So once again, I cannot stress enough the importance of routines and procedures. And the last thing I want to add on this before we conclude our teacher talk for this morning is we had a speaker come in. It was called MTSS, Multiple Tier System Support, Restorative Practices and everything. But he came in and he kind of laid out classroom management from his perspective. And what he asked us to do, he says, all right, give me an action of a behavior in a classroom that is disruptive, or a behavior in a classroom that is causing some problems. And so, we gave him some different examples. So an example might be that a kid was making noises, or a kid was tapping his pencil on the desk, or something like that, something disruptive. And of course, we all have different examples. But then he asks us, okay, tell me what happened right before that. So right before that happened, that went on, what occurred? And so we had to think about it. And so we tried to identify what the trigger was. So there's a trigger that caused a kid to act a certain way. Now it could be just he's trying to get attention, or it might be the reason, or it could be because he wasn't prepared and so he had to get a pencil. Whatever the trigger was, whatever the event happened right before that behavior, that is a trigger. And so then he asks us, so many times we focus upon the consequence. The student acts this way, and therefore they have a consequence, which I'm definitely all about consequence. I believe in strongly in the discipline and so forth. But he said if we focus more attention on the triggers, then we can eliminate a lot of the behaviors before they even happen. And something clicked inside of me, go, oh my gosh, that's what I've been doing in my classroom, is that I don't necessarily look for the trigger, but I create routines and procedures in the classroom that creates the environment so less of those triggers happen. So real quick example, if let's say students are poking other students with a pencil, let's say they're walking and they poke a student with a pencil, what happened right before that? The answer is the student got out of their seat. So I create rules in the classroom that if students want to get out of their seat, they need to raise their hand or get my attention, something of that sort. So by creating routines and procedures in your classroom and being consistent with those routine procedure classroom, what happens, you can eliminate a lot of those triggers, which in turn eliminates a lot of that behavior, which in turn makes your life a lot easier. So this whole thing of classroom management, it's a big concept. That was an easy term, classroom management, but there's so much that goes into it. So with that said, we're going to include Teacher Talk Morning Edition, Episode 2. Once again, if you would like a free copy of my course, I'll put it in the description down below. Just click on that, and it'll get you a free copy. Have a great day.